The kitchen smelled like burnt toast. That's the first thing I noticed when my daughter walked through the door that chilly Tuesday evening. Not that her face was stark pale, not that her fingers were trembling as she unbuttoned her coat, just that bitter, scorched smell. I was embarrassed and I started scrambling around the counter, saying something foolish about making a fresh batch. She just said, "It's fine, Mom." But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring past my shoulder, out the small window that faced the dark backyard. My daughter, I'll call her by her childhood name Maya, had driven 3 hours from the city without a word. No phone call, just a text at 4:30 p.m. that read, "Coming over. Please be home." Maya was 38. She was a brilliant biochemical engineer who had developed a patented filtration system for pharmaceuticals. She'd built her laboratory from a tiny startup into a highly sought-after firm. When a global medical conglomerate bought her out 2 years ago, she became independently wealthy, the kind of wealth that means you never look at a price tag again. She bought me this house, paid off my medical bills, and told me to rest. 4 years ago, she married Arthur. I tried with him. I really did. He came from old money, the kind of family that owns shipping lines and looks at self-made people like they are temporary guests in a high-class club. At their wedding, Arthur's father didn't ask Maya about her research. He asked about her profit margins, his eyes calculating, cold, and assessing. Maya loved Arthur though, so I kept my mouth shut. That's what mothers do when their children believe they've found happiness. But that Tuesday evening Maya was nowhere near happy. I set a bowl of chicken soup in front of her. She took exactly 2 sips, her spoon clicking against the porcelain in short, nervous rhythms. "Are you feeling all right, Maya?" I asked, sitting across from her. She finally looked at me, her eyes hollow. "I've been restructuring my finances, Mom. I met with a private estate lawyer last week. I've transferred the entirety of my personal liquid assets, $15 million, into a private trust. Under your name." I gasped. I told her I didn't want it. I told her to take it back. But she shook her head with a terrifyingly slow, deliberate finality. "It's already done. The paperwork was finalized 3 days ago. It's sitting in a secure account that only your signature can release." "Why, Maya? Are you and Arthur divorcing? Is the lab being sued?" She looked back at the window. The rain was hitting the glass like handfuls of gravel. "I just needed to know it was safe," she whispered. "With someone who actually loves me. Someone they can't buy." She left at 8 p.m. She hugged me at the door, burying her face into my neck, holding on so tightly I could feel the rapid beating of her heart. I told her to text me the second she got back to the city. She whispered, "I love you, Mom. Remember the trust." She never texted. I called her at midnight. Voicemail. I called at 2 a.m. Voicemail. I fell into a fitful sleep, telling myself her phone had simply died. At 6:15 a.m. my phone rang. It was Arthur. His voice didn't sound frantic. It sounded rehearsed, clipped, and perfectly controlled. "Helen," he said, using my first name like a stranger would. "I'm calling to let you know Maya is unaccounted for. She left the house late last night after a severe emotional argument. The police have been notified. But Helen, before things get chaotic, I suggest you look through her things. If she left any corporate documents or financial passwords with you, you need to hand them over to my family's legal team immediately. It would be very unfortunate if you were implicated in her unstable behavior." The line went dead. 2 days later, the police found Maya's car abandoned near a steep ravine 50 miles outside the city. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, just her purse left on the passenger seat. The official police report labeled it a missing person under suspicious circumstances, heavily leaning into Arthur's narrative that Maya had been suffering from severe work-related paranoia and mental exhaustion. I was shattered. I sat in my quiet house for 3 days, paralyzed by a grief so heavy I could barely breathe. But on the 4th day I remembered her words. Remember the trust. I opened the digital files Maya's estate lawyer had encrypted and emailed to me the day before she arrived. At the very bottom of the document folder, there was an audio file labeled Internal Influence MP3. I clicked play and my daughter's voice filled my kitchen. It wasn't a note to me. It was a compilation of hidden recordings she had taken over the last 4 months. The first recording was Arthur and his father. The clinical trial data is compromised, Arthur, the father's voice said, slick as oil. If Maya pulls the patent back, the acquisition falls through. We'll be liable for the $30 million shortfall. She won't sign the compliance waiver, Arthur replied, his voice devoid of the warmth he usually faked. She keeps talking about ethics. She doesn't understand how our world works. Then she becomes a liability, his father said. And liabilities must be liquidated. Have the board increase the corporate key person life insurance policy on her. Max it out. The next recording was from the night she disappeared. I heard Maya's voice, sharp and terrified. I know what you did to the laboratory books, Arthur. You forged my clearance to approve those faulty filters. I'm going to the federal regulators tomorrow morning. Then the sound of a heavy glass shattering. Arthur's voice dropped to a sinister whisper. You aren't going anywhere, Maya. You think people will believe a hysterical woman over my family? Look at yourself. You're unraveling. The recording cut out. My tears dried up instantly, replaced by a cold, burning rage. They hadn't just driven my daughter away. They had done something terrible to her to protect their family empire and collect a massive insurance payout. And they thought a 62-year-old retired schoolteacher would be too weak, too poor, and too frightened to stop them. The next week, the onslaught began. Arthur's high-powered attorneys filed an injunction against me, claiming that Maya was mentally incompetent when she moved the $15 million to my name. They accused me of elder coercion, claiming I had manipulated my unstable daughter to steal family-adjacent wealth. They sent private investigators to park outside my house. They dug into my past, trying to find anything to humiliate me in court. Arthur called me one evening, his voice smooth and threatening. Helen, let the trust go. We will give you a comfortable stipend. If you fight this, we will drag Maya's name through the mud, and you will end up bankrupt and alone. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. My daughter drove 3 hours through a storm because she knew you were a monster, Arthur. I am not letting go of anything. I hired an aggressive, sharp-witted attorney named Sarah, who specialized in white-collar crime. We didn't play defensive. We went straight to the federal prosecutors and handed over the internal understructure notes and MP3, along with the financial footprints Maya had meticulously left behind in the trust documentation. Maya hadn't just moved her money to keep it safe from a divorce. She had used the transfer to create a forensic breadcrumb trail. The $15 million had been clean, but the accounts Arthur's family had tried to pull it from were tied to shell companies used for money laundering and corporate fraud. The legal battle lasted 14 months. It was a grueling, exhausting circus. There were days I sat at Sarah's office desk at midnight, staring at thousands of pages of bank statements, my head pounding, wondering if we would ever win against an empire with endless resources. They had 3 rows of lawyers in expensive suits. I had Sarah and a folder of audio files. But truth has a weight that money cannot support forever. Because the federal government was now involved, they subpoenaed the shipping company's internal servers. They found the forged signatures, the fraudulent insurance policies, and the hidden offshore accounts Maya had flagged. Arthur's father was arrested first, indicted on 14 counts of wire fraud and corporate conspiracy. Arthur's world collapsed like a house of cards. The corporate acquisition fell through, their creditors called in their debts, and their multi-generation family business filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Arthur himself was arrested 3 months later, not just for the fraud, but on felony charges of obstruction of justice and corporate tampering, connected to Maya's disappearance. They couldn't prove murder without a body, but Arthur is currently sitting in a state penitentiary serving a 15-year sentence for financial devastation. His family name is completely ruined. I still live in the house Maya bought me. The $15 million sits untouched in a foundation I set up in her name, funding independent ethical research for young scientists. Every Tuesday night I still look out that small kitchen window. The pain of her absence never truly goes away. It just becomes a permanent part of the room, like the furniture or the walls. On my counter sits a photo of us from the day she graduated with her doctorate. She's wearing her velvet cap, her arms thrown around my neck, laughing so hard her eyes are closed. She was brilliant, she was brave, and when she was backed into a corner, she trusted her mother to finish the fight. Sometimes people ask me how I survived those 14 months of threats in courtrooms. I just tell them the truth. My daughter gave everything she had to make sure the truth was safe with me. The very least I could do was make sure it loud enough for the world to hear.